to know. Welcome to Drink and Draw from the Wisconsin Veterans Museum. As I mentioned earlier, I'm your host, Yvette Pino, YVETTE. I use she, her pronouns, and I am happy to have all of you here joining us tonight. If you see me scurrying back and forth, I'm just making sure that I check to make sure we don't have participants in the waiting room. And without further ado, let's get started. I am actually for little housekeeping. Just a reminder that this program is brought to you not only by the Wisconsin Veterans Museum Foundation, but through a sponsorship of the memory of Pat Finley. So thank you to those that donate to the museum's foundation so that we can continue to provide you programs like these at no cost to you. And we can proudly say that we're not only nationwide by going virtual, but we've gone international as well, as I know we've had participants all over the world join us. So I really appreciate you being here. I know this is being recorded. However, Molly, our wonderful education staff, has moved on to work with our foundation. And so I know we're still working out how the program will be uploaded to YouTube. Once I know that, we'll be happy to share that with you so that you can have the reference video after, because we can never seem to get through the drawings, but that's a good thing. We're here to gather with a group of folks that just want to learn a little bit about history and draw that history. And when we draw it, we examine it a little bit closer. So without further ado, Lisa asked the question if we have a reference photo. Yes, I'll be pulling it up here momentarily. I just wanted to kind of go over our introductions and let you know what we're doing tonight. I am starting a new drawing series for the museum called Battlefield en Plein Air. And if you're not familiar what en plein air is, it's ENPLEINAIR. That is where you go out into nature with an easel or a sketch pad and you draw within that environment. This is our virtual take on that. It's always been a goal of mine to actually go on site in the area and the place and bring you that presentation live in plein air and to actually host plein air events in historic landmarks. So this is the beginning, laying the groundwork for that. And now that I'm in North Carolina, I have access to battlefields that I never had access to before. So I'm going to be looking at this first battlefield in plein air at the Battle of Bentonville, which is actually not far up the street from where I currently live. And we're going to look at the Wisconsin connection to the Battle of Bentonville. So that being said, we are going to be drawing. I did the hike at Bentonville, and I will show you images from that in a little brief video. But we're going to be doing a landscape, and I had mentioned before in other drink and draw sessions that I wanted to return color pencil drawing, but I wanted to use this textured surface. So I finally found the textured sandpaper. I found this at the art store in a large sheet and I cut it down. It's a 500 grit. And we're talking, it's like sandpaper, like what you would get at the hardware store, but as opposed to this, bright red grit paper, which you could draw on. We can experiment later if you want. But as opposed to that, this is used for pastel and colored pencil. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my crazy face off the screen and I'm going to go ahead and pull up this image. Now, at first glance, this might not be anything that you might write home about, but when I start explaining the environment that I took this from and why Bentonville is actually quite an important battle at the end of the Civil War, this picture actually strikes a little bit more of a more emotional, it hits you a little bit more emotionally simply because of where everybody was situated and what was happening. There's actually a marker right to the left of this telling us who was here at this exact moment. And the reason I chose the Battle of Bentonville for February and now another little bit of information, this is a two-part series. So we will be doing February and then March, we're going to have another drink and draw. So it's not listed on our events on the museum webpage yet. Yes, this is Bentonville, North Carolina, Sherry. Yes. And that that's what I'm getting to is that the anniversary of this battle is March 19th through 21st. It happened March 19th through 21st of 1865. And on March 16th, I believe, they're having some events and reenactors. I've never been to a Civil War reenactment, so this will be my first. I will be out there drawing on my own as an audience member, not as a public event. But so I asked if we could do a two-part series and bring this back in on March 22nd. So that event will be listed on the museum website in the next coming weeks or so. But for tonight, we're going to focus on the battlefield with the colored pencil. And then we've had some requests to review some of the medicine from the military. And this battle actually saw a lot of surgery innovation and some realities of what it was like to practice medicine on the battlefield. So we will, yeah, Sherry, maybe I'll see you there. We'll email and hopefully maybe we can link up for that event. So we're here to draw tonight. So I wanted to tell you about the new drawing series, but I also wanted to give you a little background of what my plan is. The Battle of Bentonville, I'm going to give you a brief history, and then at the end, we're actually going to get to listen to the audio from the North Carolina History and Archives of this specific spot. It's called Morris Farm, and so we're going to hear the audio tour at the end, and which is really kind of cool. You can call in, dial in, and hear it on your own if you want. But this is the Battle of Bentonville, the last stand in the Carolinas. I just got this after visiting the site and hiking out there. It's actually quite a great book. It covers a lot of oral histories. And so you get a little bit more, the storytelling isn't as dry as just looking at maps. You're actually getting narratives from the people, from the young soldiers all the way up to the generals. And so I highly recommend maybe looking a little bit more into that if you're interested. But one of the reasons I wanted to do this battlefield in plein air is because there's going to be another component called sentry duty. And I apologize for those of you that haven't joined us before. I leave the image up on screen. So this image here to the left, I leave it up on screen the whole time. So you are welcome to start your drawing, start your composition. I'm going to go over techniques here in a minute. But while I give a little of the story and the history, oh, I have people to admit. So give me 1 second. Hi, everybody. For those of you that just joined us, welcome. We're going to get started drawing here. I'm just giving the background. I'm not going to start that over, but we're focusing on landscape with colored pencils, drawing the Battle of Bentonville, or the landscape where that battle happened. So just reviewing, the image will be on the screen at all times. So you're welcome to start your drawing, start your composition. Again, I'm working in colored pencil, but if you wanted to just use regular graphite, ballpoint pen, whatever materials you have at home, you're welcome to do so. So for right now, I have the image fairly large. As I start drawing, I will go ahead and reduce it in size, but while you're getting your composition started, I'll go ahead and keep it large. So the reason I wanted to focus on these Civil War fields is that I've mentioned before in other drink and draws, I studied the watercolors that the Wisconsin Veterans Museum has in their collection, the John Gaddis watercolors. He was with the 12th Wisconsin in Company E, and he documented their experiences as they went from Wisconsin. They actually did, I've mentioned before, they did the opposite tour of what I did in my life. They went from Wisconsin to Missouri, through Hannibal, Missouri, up through Tennessee, and ended up out in the Carolina. I don't think they ended up in Carolinas, but went up through Tennessee. And they were supposed to head back to New Mexico and then got rerouted back to Wisconsin. So they did the opposite journey of what I did in my life. So we have over 15 watercolors in our collection that he painted in the field in plein air. And when I say sentry duty, it's guard duty. When you set up a perimeter around your area, the security area, people take rotations going on guard duty. So a lot of artists will often draw and paint while they're on guard duty. I did that as well. I will say I didn't take advantage quite nearly as much of drawing my environment, but there is something about documenting place and finding the beauty in conflict, and finding the beauty in wherever you're at. And many soldiers did that, as well as correspondents, because photography was in its infancy. So battlefield photography from the Civil War is actually staged. A lot of people don't realize that. It is in fact reality, but it wasn't in real time, because the exposure of a camera lens took so long. So you needed to wait, an hour sometimes for an exposure to happen. So what we have as documentation are these beautiful drawings and paintings of the battle, a lot of quick sketches, and that's what plein air drawing is often. It's just quick sketches, observation sketches, for more in-depth detailed work. So as we go and experience these battlefield and plein air drawings, I'm hoping to maybe capture that idea of what it's like to be in this spot when something is happening. This day this picture was taken is very similar to, I just went like a week and a half ago, so it's going to be very similar to what they would have seen in March of 1865. It's a warmer climate now, so you might not have seen as much greenery, but as the landscape of the farm has not changed very much since this happened. So we're going to be focusing on colored pencils on sanded paper. However, I did bring some other supplies here. If you want to just draw on mixed media paper, you can do that. Or you're just standard drawing paper, you can do that. And of course, you just have your regular sketch paper. And the difference between all of these is really going to be the weight of the paper, so how flimsy it is, or how sturdy, the texture, the tooth on the paper, how smooth is it, and really the tint of it. So what's the background color? Is it just, white? And how it absorbs pencil versus ink. Mixed media can take watercolor, ink. We've done different things. Here's the colored pencil rendering we did last year sometime. And you'll see, I'll mention this as we get to layering on the sandpaper. On this, like this is a mixed media, so the tooth, it's a really heavy stock paper, and the tooth is a little bit it's a little bit of a rough surface, but not too much. But you really have to work smoothly and think more strategically with the application of your color, simply because you can't, what you'll see on this sandpaper is I'm going to be able to layer from dark to light like you would do with painting. Because of the tooth, it holds the pigment in a different way. Whereas on this smoother paper, you want to think more reductively, whereas you don't want to necessarily, you can start dark to light, but you're not going to be able to add like this was a off-white whitewashed boat. You can see as I started adding the white, I wasn't able to really get the white to crisp up because I didn't have that. I've already mashed the fibers of this paper so smoothly down that it won't sit on the edge. Whereas if you look at this example, and I'm about to layer and show you, I went from a really dark, and I'm able to get that white to just sit on the surface, or in this drawing here. And you can see how delicate this is. My finger, that's 3 inches. So that's a 3-inch by 4-inch little drawing. And you can see, you get a nice little bit of detail. I didn't go in full detail on that, but you will be able to go in and get some crisp little details at the end that's not always allowed when you're using the smoother paper. But don't fret, we're gonna go over the sandpaper, and then if you have questions about the smoother paper, chime in on the chat and I'd be happy to answer that. Let me start. I just want to make sure those of you that joined us a little bit late, if you're confused or lost in the sauce about what I talked about, just shoot me a chat and I can pause and cover a few things, but I want to get started on a little bit on the tutorial. So what we're going to do is, at first, I'm going to show you how to get these layers of colors. So the thing about the sandpaper, and I'm going to probably repeat myself quite a bit tonight, but just bear with me. With the sandpaper, you have texture. And with that texture, it allows you to be a little, I have a heavy hand. I draw really hard on my surface. It allows you to put more pigment down heavier, and it has more grace than if I did that on the other paper. I wouldn't be able to do the layers that I want to do here. So the thing about colored pencil, especially on texture paper, that I've seen that is most successful is starting with these little circles. And I'm barely pressing, I mean, literally barely pressing onto the surface of this paper. And if you remember from the ballpoint pen drawing, it was the same thing where we're really trying to not be heavy-handed, because the idea is layering up these nice soft light layers to give you depth, right? You can see it up in here. This is 5 colors layered on top of each other. This is 3 or 4. This is 4 colors. You can really start to see that 3-dimensionality that happens by layering colors. Whereas if you just did flat, if I just did a flat blue, it would be fine. I mean, graphically, it would look fine. That's a definite style, but it would be 2-dimensional, right? It wouldn't look like those trees' leaves are coming out at you or the clouds are coming out of the sky. And that's just a matter of choice. And I'm also a graphic designer, so when I'm doing vector illustrations in the computer, I need to go for that 2-dimensional look all the time. And I am able to make 3-dimensional renderings using shadows and color theory. But for this, that's not what we're going for. We want to have a little bit more of some realism thrown in there. But what I want to show you here, as you can see as I'm talking, is I, again, am barely touching the surface, and I'm doing little tiny circles. And of course, you could do long strokes like this too. That's fine. I personally am trying to really track this sort of it's meditative. This repetition of circle, it teaches you patience. It forces you to really think about where you're moving with this color. And what I'm doing here is I'm laying down a base layer to develop something like this for this sky. And I'm using a blue indigo. So it's a really dark blue. And what we're doing is we're setting that underlayer of tone. So if you can see my cursor here, this like deep blue indigo here in the sky, you don't want to just start with that color. You need to give it some, underpainting. The masters in oil painting would use like sepia wash underneath to get that tone, to develop those layers of color. So I'm going fairly quickly right now for the sake of this tutorial, but really you could spend, a night just sitting in front of the TV doing these little spirals and just get one layer done. But it's going down fairly quickly, and I'm getting a pretty solid covering just in, 2 or 3 minutes that I've been talking. So I'm going to switch from there, and this was the really dark blue indigo, and I'm going to go to the next probably lighter color. This is like a blue indigo violet. It's a violet blue. And then I'm just going to build up some more color in there, and I'm going to go right on top of it. And I'll show you can see almost immediately how you already start building contrast and depth. I mean, for somebody like me that's been drawing my whole life and has always struggled with putting too much pigment or paint down, and makes my images really muddy, this is really satisfactory to see this already start to develop with just two colors. It's already playing with the optics to make us think we're seeing more than what we are. So now you can see I've added that next layer of blue. So then I'm going to go down to just another version of blue. And what you can see if I lay these out here, this is dark, getting a little bit lighter. and now I'm getting a little bit lighter. When you're messing with color and color theory, you shift your value and your hue. And so I'm going like on the color wheel, I would be taking it either if you want to add, if you want it to get a little change your hue, you would add black. And I always get this backwards, so if I do, forgive me, but you would add black, a little bit of black to your original color, and it will start to gray it out a little bit. And if you want to change your value, you add a little bit of white and it starts to lighten it a little bit. So that's sort of what we're doing, is we're going to just the next lighter color. And it just helps you build up some of that tone in the sky. So we're here now, and I'm rushing this a little bit, but it's just because I want to show you what I'm doing here. Yes, this is how I made the clouds in the third circle. Exactly how I made the clouds. I'm building up these layers of color. And if you're not quite good at it and you're not fully comfortable starting with that real dark layer, you can maybe start one layer up, if you don't have the sandpaper, for example. But now I've added 3 colors, and I'm going to start getting into this, like, a little bit of the blue that's a little bit closer to that sky color. So on the one on the one up here, I actually you know, in my brain said there were clouds, as opposed to the striation on this, the way this just kind of curves. They're not necessarily clouds up here. So I'm just going to do some of these circles and get this tone mapped on here. And as you start drawing on this sandpaper, I know that it wasn't announced what supplies we were using, so I don't anticipate any of you all having sandpaper tonight. But if you decide you want to experiment with sandpaper and colored pencil, or like this is pastel paper too, once you start layering these colors, what it feels like is like if you were drawing on hide, like the original vellum that they would draw the illuminated manuscripts on, or the original Bibles, was stretched hide, right? It was a sheep or a goat, and their hide was stretched and tanned and bleached, and that made this wonderful textured paper that you could paint on, and it lasts forever. So that's what it starts to feel as you start adding more and more color. It doesn't feel like sandpaper anymore. It feels like almost like not drawing on skin, but if you had the textured hide. So now I'm just gonna do a little bit of a lighter color, and then we'll do some highlight with a nice little bit of a yellow to mimic light coming through, and then I'll wrap up with the white. Like I said, I'm really sort of rushing this because I want to make sure that we get, through talking about composition in our drawing, and I'll learn a little bit about the Battle of Bentonville. I've decided I'm not going to try to be your Civil War historian, but I do want to explain a little bit about what I've learned in the last couple of weeks as a new kid on the block studying Civil War history. I can start to see what all the excitement is about. There's something to be said about actually being in a place where something happens for it to be more meaningful, more impactful. We just didn't have that growing up in Albuquerque. So for as far as the Civil War goes. So we're getting some nice, lovely dimension here. Um, you know, if you take your time with it and then stop for a minute, take a look at what direction you're going, you can really start to see the movement of the sky, and you can play with that and use that to your advantage. You know, I came back to the darker color to add a little bit, to really start to figure out how I'm popping this shape and what does that shape look like. It's amazing how much shape and texture is in a wide open space, like something like the sky, right? Like I said, you would think you could just just paint a whole flat of blue, and there you go, you're done. But there's so much more dimensionality to it. The reason I love teaching drawing, live drawing, is especially inside the walls of a museum, is it makes us stop and see. We have to actually, in order to draw it, you have to examine what you're looking at and you have to consider what you're looking at. And so that part of the thought process, when you're learning about history, helps you absorb it a little bit more. I'm a visual learner, so if I have something right in front of my face, I've got a photograph. I had a photographic memory. It's not so much anymore, but uh, it will etch itself in my brain, and I can describe it to you. Um, but when I have to examine it, like when you're drawing a portrait, you really have to figure out, the way the curve of somebody's chin, the bridge of their nose. Um, it's a very, intimate, personal thing. That's why, in a genre in the 19th century, so right before the Civil War and during the Civil War, giant landscape, beautiful, realistic landscape paintings were in vogue because people felt that the majestic of the landscape was bringing you closer to divinity, bringing you closer to God. So that is why you have these beautiful, vast, open landscapes, with light shining through, and it really asking you to reflect in nature, uh, because of your proximity to God while being in nature. And I have a question in chat. Does this technique work the same on watercolor pencil paper? Yeah, it would. Your watercolor pencil paper, your watercolor paper is going to be really, at most of the time, it's a little bit more textured. So you can actually play with those textures to your advantage. If you're using watercolor pencil, like if the idea is that you want to move forward and use the watercolor element of that, meaning you would draw with colored pencil, and then I would dip my paintbrush in water and then be able to, I'd be able to smooth this out and create a wash with it. It would absolutely work. I think there's something to be said about doing your layered colors with water paper, and get sort of your background watercolor wash, to build that tone. And then after it's dry, go in, you'll still have that texture on the paper, go in and build some more layers. I think you actually would get a really beautiful completed painting by adding the colored pencil on top of your watercolor wash. Personally, I think it would be gorgeous to finish. And I have seen compositions that have done that. So absolutely, sure, yes. And you can see here, like I said, I use this creamy yellow, because the white in the clouds isn't white. It's actually light reflecting, and you have uh condensation in the atmosphere. And so it's what we see in the white of the clouds is the reflection of light on that condensation. So you don't want to just jump right in and add white, because optically that's incorrect. There's actually, if you look in here, there's a lot of, nice lavenders and violets. And so you could really play with the purples in this. Again, I'm just doing a quick tutorial. So these tutorials help me be a little bit more efficient with my drawings too, and maybe they're helping prevent me from uh cluttering my image and muddying it up. So here you can see in whatever 10 minutes that I've been working on this, that I personally think you can see clouds being built up in there. Imagine if we're doing this. This is a little teeny tiny 2-inch circle. I'll be doing an 11 by 14 in my composition. So think about how beautiful an entire sky, if you could really think about how uh, you layer these colors up, and I can move this, move some of that pigment with the white and smudge. I didn't talk about smudging in our supplies. So there's something called a smudge stick, or back in my day, my finger. This is, if you've seen these, they look like little rolled up pieces of cardboard, essentially. It's paper rolled to a fine tip. I use paper towel. You can use scrap paper, or if you're using pastels is where you would use your finger, or like graphite. But with colored pencils, like, so if I wanted to smooth some of this out, you could smooth it. And because we're on the sandpaper, you're not going to get a lot of that. So if that's something you're thinking about with sandpaper, I wouldn't do it. I'm not going to do it because I can't stand the scratchy noise it makes. But you can see it's picking up a little bit of that pigment. But I think let the texture do its work on these. I think if you could avoid smudging on the sandpaper, I would advise that. But to each his own. If that's something you want to experiment with, it, go for it. Same with erasers. I mean, you could have erasers, and you can reduce, but this isn't the type of medium that allows you really to do that sort of reductive technique where you can pull out pigment after you've already applied it. You might be able to scrape away a little bit, but you're gonna mess with the fibers and the texture, and I think you'll lose out. So again, you can see with just a few minutes of what you can build up. I would add a lot more detail in this horizon here, and then you've got the clouds here. And I literally used 1, 2, 3, 4, I think 5, 6. Again, this is like 6 colors. This was 6. And I think this is 4 or 5. But play around with that. If you are drawing on regular sketchbook paper, let me find. So on sketchbook paper, let me find that drawing that I had. Now I'm not going to find it. It was the first thing I opened to when I was showing you. I was on mixed media. My bad. So in mixed media, right? So we'll go back to this example. So this is, let's see what it is, 98 pounds. So it's almost 100 pounds. So it's a little bit thicker. Still got some flexibility. And it's made for, to hold ink. So it's pretty, the way the fibers are woven and the type of sizing that's in the paper allows inks to not bleed through. That's what you're looking for when you look for mixed media. But if I were to do, I'll just do a quick one on this one. I'll do a square. I can already feel the smoothness of it is not, it's a much different feel than I had on the sandpaper. It's softer. It's just no other way to explain it. It's just, it feels softer, fluffier. And it's still, it's still fairly quickly, but the thing about drawing on paper like this is you want to just go really soft again. Don't this isn't laying, oh, I went off the paper here. Laying down heavy pigmentation like that right away, you're going to see I won't be able to do many layers. It's just going to turn into a blue blobbity blob. I'll show you the difference in layering up those three colors, those colors. This one starts to blend more. This blends a little bit more. So it's starting to look more like a painting, right? Which is actually why I love this, because this is usually the way I draw. But now that I've learned in painting and with the sandpaper technique to start building up and then being able to add that white at the end, I kind of am preferring that. Because look, when I try to add, let's do, if I add this yellowish color now, that helps for a gradient. Like I was able to make that beautiful gradient, right? So now we're getting into like an almost graphic-y type look. But if I go to add the cloud now, look, what's happened is I've already forced down the fibers of the texture of this paper. So there's nothing left for that. There's no tooth left for that pigment to sit on. So I'm getting, I can get a nice painterly feel in some ways because of the Prismacolors. Like that's why I love Prismacolors, because of their blending techniques. But it's going to look much more of a smoothed out, blended painting, which is fine, except that even on paintings where you smooth everything out, you need to add a little bit of textured detail on top. So this was from that drink and draw where you could see where we just started adding up layers of colors very lightly to start building, a more dominant composition. But I mean, even look at the difference between that layered color and that layered color. I just think you get a better, you're getting a richer opportunity using the sandpaper. But there's some really incredible colored pencil drawings on regular paper. I actually have shared that before. I was a colored pencil artist early in my career and life, and I got really good at portrait art using colored pencils. So I'm not against using it on regular paper. I got really good at layering the colors. But as I'm getting older and my hands are getting weaker, I don't have it in me to do as many layers and grind into the paper like I used to. So this is actually really kind of cool for me to find this new technique. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk to you a little bit about composition. And as I set up my composition, and then I want to give you a little background of Bentonville. And I'm going to pull the camera out just a little bit. And I'm going to make this guy a little bit smaller. So if anybody's having trouble seeing it, don't hesitate to let me know. I can modify my drawing and composition. So no worries at all. But I wanted to go over, I'm going to make it small just for a second, and then I'll pull it back up, but I wanted to show you some composition concepts. So when we're thinking about making our images or choosing what we want to draw, or let's say we're in plein air, I'm in the middle of this farm and I'm trying to decide what I want to draw and how I need to set up and what's going to be a good composition versus a bad composition. Some things I want to think about. There's different rules of composition. And I have this laid out with some light brown marks. If you can't see those, let me know and I'll zoom in a little bit more, but it's the basic the same landscape. This curve here is this curve here. The tree line, it floats to the back. So as I talk about these composition techniques, keep that in mind. So in composition, we have different types, right? Like you have the rule of thirds, which basically means you break everything up into thirds. So I would go one region, two region, three regions, 1, 2, 3, right? And what you need to do is break things up within those rule of threes. You're dividing everything into a third horizontally and vertically. And where the lines intersect is where you should have the main subject of your shot, right? So this is the golden third the golden section. So in rule of thirds, this will be more evenly spaced out, but this is the golden section, and the word golden is going to come up a lot in composition. And that's because that's where you want everything to hit, is in that sweet spot. This one is the golden section, which is this third area, is where you want your main like focal point to fall. So in this composition, it could be a golden section. I don't particularly think it is. I actually think the composition I have set up falls more in line of, there's something called the golden triangles or the golden spiral. So in the golden triangles, these angles go out. And again, wherever your lines intersect or in these triangles is where you want your main focal points to be. So it's nice because it's dynamic. It's got a little bit of diagonal to it. It's not just horizontal and vertical. It's not just parallel lines, but you've got ways in which your eyes can move, like zigzags, and it's just got diagonals. It's one of the most frequently seen types of composition that you'll find. I use the golden spiral quite often, and often unintentionally. It's just the way my brain works. And that is where you find some sort of curve, and then your eye is being led to this spiral, right? Like, so in the golden spiral, you use this, like with golden triangles fall in here too. It's just, it creates dynamism in your composition. And so since I think the curve is here for me, that's more, you can turn it, you can turn it in different ways, but this is how, when you're looking at the image that we've got here, this leading line right here, right, is the diagonal moving upwards. So my eye is going up and then it's spiraling along this tree line. So if I make this big, this goes up and spirals around, and this composition right here is really, this tree is one of the reasons why I chose this particular image. Can I download the tools? You mean the composition? Yes, I can get those to you. I just made them on transparencies, but yeah, I actually have references I can get to you. The spirals, yeah, the golden triangle, sure. And I've got, Diane said, when I added the creamy yellow to the blues, it turned greenish, teal look instead of white. What did you do to get it white? Well, that's the thing about, are you on regular paper or are you on textured paper? Because if we go back to the mixed media book, I'll show you. That's why I was saying when you're working with the regular paper, you have to think a little bit differently. You have to think a little bit more, instead of additive, like I was adding colors and laying up, you have to think a little bit more reductive. So sometimes you have to start lighter and then add your darks. So for example, on this blue that I did, I'm not sure what's happening with my, I don't know what I hit. Okay. So, on this blue, if I were to add this cream and really start to layer it in, and I'll zoom in on this because I'm going to start getting a greeny, it's going to start becoming green or teal, because the way color mixes is yellow and blue makes green, right? In the color wheel. So if I move this over and I'll focus this a little bit. So on this color wheel, you can see right here that I conveniently had, you're using the lighter sketch paper. Yeah. So what you're going to want to do, and I'll show you that in a second. Because if you've got your primary colors, right? So you've got red, yellow, blue are your primary colors. When you mix blue and yellow, you get green. And so if you're on a paper like this where you don't have enough tooth to hold it to keep it separate, you have to think a little bit more, like, let's say I add this little blue first, and I would go a little bit lighter and I would add some of this cream color where your white's going to be, right? I would add a little of the cream color and then add your white. And I would add your white first, or if you're on white paper like this, you're not on a tinted paper, you want to add just a hint of blue down below. So let's say I've got like this like light bluish gray that's got probably blue with white in it, is in order to mix it. So I would start, instead of going really dark to start with in my sky, I would start with this lighter blue like that. And then I would start to build up with just a little bit of yellow. You don't want to go crazy with it. Just a little bit of yellow to get that light coming through. And it will be a little bit of green. That's okay. When we photograph something, it's a type of filter and lens. We're seeing this through a lens, right? So often there are green hues in the sky that it just depends on whose optics are looking. I personally see green in a lot of things, but so don't be afraid if it gives you a little bit of green. You're obviously, we're not going for green as our sky, right? But you still want a little bit of, see how it's creating a little, that same sort of depth that we were looking for before. And the tricky part about colored pencils on sketch paper like this is that uh, uh white's a little bit hard to show up, and which is the trouble I ran into with this boat. And so most colored pencil sets, come with white, right? Like they come with this white and the yellow, but you can find tones of grays. So like a variety of grays. And then I would use a soft gray to blend in with this blue. And then if you're on sketch paper, a lot of times you can use an eraser and reduce out, rather than trying to do it with a colored pencil. You actually let the paper do the work for you, and you pull out pigment with the eraser. Colored pencils, depending on which colored pencils you're using and what type of eraser you have, it's easier said than done. But that's the methodology. When you have a sky like this, you're going to want to start with your lights and then merge your darks in and blend them in a little bit more cautiously than what I was doing with the dark layers on the sanded paper. Now, if you're at home and you don't have the sandpaper and you don't know where to find it, or your art store doesn't carry it, because it took me forever to find this doggone sandpaper. If you want to create texture on your paper and you don't have access to a store, if you have Elmer's glue, or it's called PVA glue, it's an acid-free, it's called PVA, like Mod Podge. You can get a piece of paper, your regular sketch paper, and apply a layer of that Mod Podge or Elmer's glue or PVA. Elmer's glue is not going to be as great. You might want to water it down a little bit, and then like tape your paper down, and then basically brush it with that PVA, that glue, and then let it dry. And that textured surface is going to give you the same. It was one of the alternates I found online for creating that sanded texture paper for pastels. Just if you like the technique I'm showing tonight and you don't want green blobs in your sky, then think about doing that technique. Otherwise, in the sky, go lightly with your blues, and you might want, the other option is to build your sky up around the whiteness of your paper. So I'm going to add those blues, but wherever there's white in the sky, I'm just going to not even cover it with my colored pencil. I'm just going to let the paper, let me erase that graphite that I had in there, right? We'll let the paper do the magic for us. And then you just do some subtle shadows in there, and then you can build up your darker colors in the in-betweens. It's harder with this one where we have these striations versus clouds. It's a little bit easier with clouds to kind of mimic that shadow without having to think a little too hard about it. So I'm sorry if that was confusing with the layers on the sandpaper and getting you a green cloud, but I would say embrace it. Like if you don't like the way it's looking, like just keep working with your blues and work around it. And I hope that helped with that explanation. Um, okay. I realize we're at the clock at 8:56, but if you guys want, I'm here. I can stay a few more minutes past the hour, so let me know and I can wrap things up. You are welcome, Diane. I can wrap things up, but I'm going to keep going for a few more minutes because I want to get through composition and show you what I would do on the larger paper. So let me zoom back out. That'll be good. So and Sherry, if you do want to look online too and look up golden spiral, golden triangle, they're really easy to find, but I can get you some reference material for that as well. So on this drawing, if we're looking at composition again, again, the reason why I chose this was because of that golden spiral. There are other rules, the rule of odds, leaving space, that doesn't have to do with any of this. But here's some good rule of thumb. Oh, Sherry, thanks for being with us tonight. Yes, email me and then we'll talk about the Battle of Bentonville. You can go on their website at the Battle of Bentonville and see what the live dates are for March. Great. Thanks for being here tonight. So just a few rules of thumb for composing a scene. You want to avoid placing the subject at the center of the drawing. So when you have, like I didn't put this tree right in the middle. If I had put it right in the smack dab in the middle, it would not have been interesting. You want to avoid placing the horizon so it cuts the drawing into two equal parts. So the horizon line is like the vanishing point, right? Where we're looking back where the land and sky meets together. If you look on here, this is about halfway through the image and the horizon line is down here. So it's a little bit lower. So you've got a big wide open sky. If it's just if it's evenly spaced, your eye doesn't know what to look at. You want to avoid placing the horizon line so it cuts the drawing into two equal parts. Oh, I just said that. Excuse me. Avoid dividing the image into two contrasting black and white full empty sections of similar size. So even on this, if I cut this in a diagonal, it does half of it spills over into the other half. So you can see that it actually has very heavy on the top angle and not a lot in the bottom right corner. You want to leave some space around the subject, and that's what we've done on that bottom right as it spirals around. And you want to avoid rigidly symmetrical images. So if I had a curve here and I had another curve over here, it might be okay, but it wouldn't be as visually dynamic. And you want to break the monotony of horizontal lines by introducing vertical elements. So if we were to take this image and just do parallel lines all the way down, that would be okay. I mean, if we just had the horizon line here and the top of the tree line there, it would be okay. But by adding these trees, these vertical elements, it gives us a little bit more something to look at. We want to avoid lines which converge at the center of the drawing. So if I just had, like, when we're talking about perspective, when you have a street going right down the center and our eye meets at the dead center middle of the image, it's okay, but this line has a curve, so it goes around. So our eyes want to see what's going around this corner here. Engineer lines of interest, which draw the viewer's eye to the inside of the drawing rather than to the outside image. So again, with this spiral, so I start from the bottom here, I work my way around the left, I curve around, and then I go back behind. So those are some composition rules to follow. I've done it again. I've drawn, and I mean, I've talked and I drew a little bit. I gave you a demo, but I didn't really get into my drawing. You can see here in the sky, I started with that technique that I was showing you with the sample, where I started with the blue, and I'm starting to work my way into the sky and start building some of that depth. While you guys continue to draw and focus on, I'm going to make this a little bit bigger so you can still work on your drawing. I do not want to end the evening without giving you the story of the Battle of Bentonville. And I am not a Civil War historian, so I'm not going to spend an incredible amount of time going in depth. One thing I want to share with you is that, as I mentioned, there is a Wisconsin connection at the Battle of Bentonville. There are several Wisconsin connections. The 22nd was there, the 21st, the 3rd Wisconsin, and General Hobart, Harrison Hobart, was in charge of one of the brigades that was very much instrumental in this battle. So in the chat, I am putting the link to the Wisconsin Veterans Museum collection for Harrison Hobart, and it is Hobart's sword. So if anybody's visited the museum or has seen any of our brand documentation, like our website, Hobart's sword is like a really big part of the images that the Wisconsin Veterans Museum uses. And this sword was awarded to Hobart by his men. So again, Harrison Hobart was instrumental in leading one of the flanks in this major battle at Bentonville. And today, February 9th, is the 160th anniversary of Hobart escaping Libby prison. So if you'll indulge me on two things tonight, I want to share with you the Hobart sword story, and then a little quick refresher on Battle of Bentonville. And because we're going to be doing this again in March, I can go more in depth on the history then, but I'm going to let you hear the audio component for the driving tour of this battlefield. But Harrison Carroll Hobart is from Chilton, Wisconsin. He served in the 21st Wisconsin Infantry Regiment. So just to give you a little bit of connection to what you're looking at on this image, if you're looking down this trail, to the left is a big wooded line, which actually I have a video to share with you. The 21st Wisconsin was actually staged in that wooded line, and then to the right is farmland, and around that corner where that tree comes around the bend, the Confederate forces were just on the other side. So if I show you this map, and I always, I'm the art curator, so I always am giving our history curators grief about having lectures with maps. That's not who I am, but for the sake of today, I actually need to give you a little bit of an idea of this map is from the hike, like the day hikes, right? And so what we're looking at is this battlefield hike. And I started here, I parked here, and I walked all the way down here, and then I walked back around. That's not what you need to know. This area right here is what's called Morris's Farm. It's 500 acres. The Morris family owned 500 acres at the time of the battle, and it still looks very similar to the way it was in 1865. And they've donated several acres for the Battlefield Trust so that people can walk through their farm in these trails and trenches to see where the battle actually was. So if we're looking at the image, the map would be going this way, and see this little curve right here? That's that curve that we're looking at right there. So if you think about it, this is wooded area. This is all wooded and swampy area. You come through woods, and then there's documentation in this book about the guys didn't, they all thought the Confederates were staging in Raleigh. So they didn't think that anybody was going to be there waiting for them. They were going to be setting up, the Union was going to be setting up their new front. But in fact, in this area here and back over here were over 6,000 Confederate soldiers waiting for them. And this battle was a series of surprises, and we didn't expect you coming. So a lot of chaos, a lot of weird, chaotic skirmishes. So as you're walking down this trail, as you can see in the image to the left, the 21st Wisconsin, I think the 19th Ohio, and another Michigan group were all staged in the wooded area. And as the Confederates came forward around this corner, they came out of the woodwork. So everybody was literally coming out of the woods. And if you think about, if you're standing where I was standing, taking this photo, looking in that tree line, it's really haunting when you think about it, but there would have been soldiers staged in that tree line that they maybe didn't see. And then there were cannons staged everywhere. It's crazy. I'll show you, this is what one of the cannons would look like, just to give you an idea too. That's actually still there. It's a Napoleon 12-pound cannon at the battlefield. So Harrison Hobart, who was leading these men around these trails and flanking the Confederates, was captured at the Battle of Chickamauga in 1862, and he was sent to Libby Prison in 1863. But what he's known for was he helped organize the digging of a secret tunnel and eventual escape of 109 soldiers in February of 1864. After his escape, he rejoined his regiment, led it through the Atlanta campaign, and was promoted to colonel on November of 1864. He commanded a brigade during Sherman's March to the Sea, which is what we're looking at now. This is part of the Battle of the Carolinas. This battle got the attention of President Lincoln, and President Lincoln brevetted him brigadier general. So because of this battle, he became a brevet brigadier general, and he continued after he mustered out. So this is one of the battles that leads to the end of the Civil War. It was Johnston, who was on the Confederate side, and I live in Johnston County, really was looking for a fight, and he found one, and it was a chaotic 3 days. And with a lot of stories to tell. I realize we're at 10 after 9, but the chaos of the moment, the Wisconsin connection. I said to you at the beginning, if you look at this image and think about it with what was happening, it holds a little bit more weight. If you again, I'll close. Let me zoom this out. I want to show you just a couple of, rather than share my screen with you, I'm just gonna pull up a little bit of the hike, so you can see the area leading up to this. So you can see the wooded fields where in this area the Michigan soldiers were actually sent, and they built trenches. And so the landworks are still there. The trenches are still there, dug up in this land. So as you're going on this hike, you can see you're going through this heavily wooded area, which at the beginning of this, like the early mornings of the 19th, they didn't think the Confederates were here, actually. And when they did run into a skirmish, they thought it was just like 800 soldiers. And it turned out to be almost 6,000 soldiers already staged there, because they thought that they were going to be in Raleigh and then heading to Wilmington, North Carolina. So as you go through here, this is just, where they camped. This is an area where they camped. But this is overlooking you come up on a hill, and this is overlooking one of the first areas of the farmland. It's like sort of a notch in the farmland. you just see this wide open area. And I trained in South Carolina for the Army, so a lot of our training was going through these woods. And then when you get into an open exposure, there's a specific way that you have to cross an open exposure. And it's one of my things that sticks in my head to this day. It's the I'm up, he sees me, I'm down. So basically, when you advance in an open field like that, that's your cadence to know how long you can be up till when you get down. So you're running, 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 and in your head you go, I'm up, he sees me, I'm down. So that's how you advance in a field like that. It's a up, run a few yards, he sees me, I'm down, get down, so that you're not caught in the crossfires. And you can see this wide open cotton field here, and then you go around the corner. So people were staged in the wooded line. There were cannons going off. They could see smoke in the distance out there. I don't want to bore you with all of the hiking videos, but just to give you an idea of, like, this is a really beautiful, majestic area. The computer translation right now is not coming through, but it's very peaceful. And this is a curve on the other side of where our tonight's image is at. So you go around this curve to the right, and that's where you come. I mean, that's looking back on the fields where we just came from. So I'll share more. Here we go. We're heading up. This is the area. I'm thinking. This is the area before we get to the field where this is looking at the field where we are basing our drawing from. So if you were in the wooded line, so if you're looking to the left of our drink and draw image, the 21st Wisconsin would have, actually 22nd, excuse me. This is their view that they would have had looking on that farmland, looking out. So, a lot of things to process. You can see this is where they have markers here. So the 33rd Indiana, the 19th Michigan, the 85th Indiana, and the 22nd Wisconsin were at this place at 1:30 on March 19th, 1865. So the image that I took was at 1:59. So roughly the same exact time of day is where we were at. And that's another image of what they were looking at. Again, the farmland has not changed very much since 1865. So quite stunning. Do we have I know, again, I didn't give you a complete lowdown of rundown of the Battle of Bentonville, but the one thing I just wanted to really point out, if I can bring that trail book back, or I can just bring this is the actual hiking map for the Battle of Bentonville, is that this tells no story whatsoever. I mean, this is the farm that we were just looking at, and wooded area, and they built trenches all along here. But I mean, literally, if you look at the book from, this is the Battle of Bentonville book. If I show you, so if you look at this map, and again, I'm not one for maps, but this will help understand the reality of what you're looking at on the screen and what was happening. All of these little gray squares are the Confederates, and all of these black squares are the Union. And this is Goldsboro Road. So this is where I parked to go see the visitor center. That's how many soldiers were saturated in this area of farmland, tucked in the woods and spread out with cannons, volleying back and forth. It's crazy to me to think about fighting in that. It's insanity. So Battle of Bentonville I'm just, scratching the surface of my exploration there. We'll have some incredible photography to bring back for March. And I will be visiting the battlefield medicine, in March, as well as being able to share some of the photographs of the reenactors. So we'll have a little bit more dynamic image to draw from. Again, that should be going live in the next week or so. It's March 22nd, I believe, is the day. It's a Friday in March. And will be same time, 7 Central, but I will be revisiting this topic and sharing. I'll probably be sharing a lot more of the history and the story rather than doing a tutorial. But again, like tonight, I will have the image on the screen for the entirety of our conversation. Does anybody have any questions or want to share their drawing? Like I said, I'm pretty familiar with everybody who's on tonight, so I don't feel like I'd have any concerns with inappropriate images. But I got really far in my drawing, as you can see. Here, I'll bring this back though as a sample for you to look at of what we were talking about with the layers. So thinking about how we use colored pencils and layering techniques. Diane, have you had any more success using maybe some of the paper as your background, as your clouds, and building up with uh blue first or second? Well, once again, I'm happy to see all of you here tonight. I know that we we will continue to gain followers and continue to make this program a little bit more fun, a little bit more interesting. Hopefully I can get some of these century duty and medical innovation drawings to the forefront. We also can consider portrait drawing and doing a little, maybe we might be able to do a little bit of painting too. I've been doing some digital painting. Margaret and Joe, will have to miss the March date. We have a concert to go to. Oh, yes. Okay. So I will make sure, because I'll be sharing the reenactment stuff, that we get that video posted on YouTube. I'm going to really work with Eric, our education curator, to get this one up on YouTube as well. So that you have a little bit more time. The vastness of landscape is always hard in this 1 hour. And then we'll miss you, Margaret and Joe. We definitely will. And but yes, please keep an eye out for that. Um, really like the history you shared. Great, cool, Diane. Yeah, I would say just what I would do is make a bunch of little circles or squares or even like miniature drawings like this and experiment with just mark making. Just using different, even if you have the like textured paper, even using diagonal lines and cross hatching to see how. That's the thing about when you can't rely on layering, you can rely on using different line marks and line weights to give you that same sort of dimensional feel, using cross hatching and using the direction of the line to build your shape in, so that you can let that paper do the work for you. I am so happy to have all of you here tonight. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. Thank you. Thank you, Tara. I will see you in March and hopefully talk to you before then. And I'm super glad you came to share time with me. And thanks, everybody. Have a good night. I'm going to put my little bit of Civil War music on as I bid you all adieu. If you have any questions, you can email info@wisvetsmuseum.com, I believe is the email. If not, just reach out on the contact on our webpage, the contact form, and they can get a message back through to me. So have a wonderful evening and a great weekend, everybody. And keep keep all our service members in your thoughts and prayers, and be safe out there. Have a good night.